What's the worst Christmas you've ever had? I'm sure everyone has their story. It's rarely as simple as not getting what you asked for or getting something generic like socks, underwear, or sweaters that itch to no end. Ideally, that shouldn't matter. Christmas isn't entirely about getting gifts. One bad gift should not ruin Christmas, no matter how old you are. But for some people, well, they really are that shallow. They couldn't care less about the deeper meaning of the holidays. To them, there is no deeper meaning. Take away the presents and all you have are tacky decorations coupled with glorified family dinners. Those who harbor this sentiment, be they children or adults, they are the utter antithesis of the Christmas spirit. I know it sounds corny, but make no mistake, that can have a cumulative effect. If too many people embrace that spirit, then the holidays as a whole become empty. And yet, the spirit of the season endures. Even at a time when Christmas has become a more secular spectacle, this deeper meaning persists. Why is that? And maybe a more important question would be, how does it continue to endure? Most people don't even ponder those questions, but they should. I mean, something like this, the wondrous holiday that we call Christmas, it can't have persisted over the centuries all on its own. You can simply assume it's one of those traditions we've just collectively decided to maintain. That's probably how most people rationalize it. And honestly, I wish I had that luxury. I would love nothing more than to experience the holidays with such ignorant bliss once more. But I just can't. I don't think I'll ever be able to see Christmas through a wholly festive lens. It's not because I don't believe in the spirit of the season. In fact, I know better than most just how powerful it is. I also know the larger truth about Christmas. Part of me wishes I didn't, but I guess that's why I feel compelled to share this. And in some respects, I was always destined to uncover the darker side of the holidays. But to understand, I'll have to share some details about my family and my upbringing. I need to make clear that this is not something I like to talk about. My childhood was as unpleasant as it was chaotic. My parents were, to put it mildly, a never-ending chaotic mess. Why they stayed married for as long as they did? Hell, I still don't know. They just argued and fought all the damn time. And when they started having kids, that just gave them even more reasons. Me being the youngest of 3 siblings, I had a front row seat to many of these fights. Some of my earliest memories consist of my parents yelling at each other for the pettiest of reasons. Whether it was about who forgot to buy eggs or who spent $90 on new running shoes. And yeah, it did get physical on a number of occasions, sometimes in ways that left lasting bruises. Once my brother and sister got old enough, they got in on the action, practically mirroring our parents' example. As for me, I guess I was lucky. I became the black sheep of the family because I didn't like arguing. I didn't like fighting. I was very much the quiet type. So much so that many joked I might have been adopted. But the conflict in my family was no laughing matter. Because in addition to all the fighting, money was always an issue. While I wouldn't go so far as to call us dirt poor, it always seemed like we were operating with a tight budget. On more than one occasion, we had issues with bills being overdue and payments being late. Unfortunately, my siblings inherited our parents' misguided views. They didn't need to understand the concept of money to grasp that what they had and what they could obtain was a never-ending struggle. So, they fought with more intensity than most, valuing their toys, clothes, and even their space on the couch. They also went above stealing or cheating one another out of something. That ended up being a big problem as they got older. I'll still never forget the time my older brother was driven home in the back of a police cruiser, having stolen a couple of video games from the mall. I also remember the day my sister got banned from the neighbors across the street. Apparently, she'd been stealing their packages and destroying the contents if it was something she didn't want. And my parents' chosen recourse for these serious crimes was unproductive. It usually just involved more yelling and fighting than usual. For the most part, I simply chose to keep my distance, letting these things play out on their own. That ended up giving me a more detached perspective. It made me seem weird and quiet. But it's something I didn't fully grasp at the time. It was only around the holidays when that perspective became much more noticeable. Even at a young age, I noticed the signs. For my parents, Christmas was the one time of year when they made a conscious effort not to fight. That was usually the best gift they could give, at least to me. But when it came to my siblings, their demands weren't nearly as simple. To them, Christmas was the ultimate equalizer, the holiday where they could obtain whatever they thought they'd been deprived of. The things they'd fought for over the past year, the toys, the games, the clothes. This was how it all evened out. And our parents willingly fed into this mentality. Whatever my brother and sister asked for, even if it was expensive and overpriced, they made a conscious effort to get it. That way, Christmas could give our family some semblance of harmony. It might have been brief and fleeting, but honestly, that was a gift in and of itself. And I came to cherish that more than any present I ever received. On some years, I even made it a point to ask for something simple and cheap. But that really didn't amount to much because their entire approach to Christmas, it was just unsustainable. You can't treat this holiday like some elaborate transaction, using presents to keep your family from fighting. Eventually, the demands of my siblings became too great. Everyone involved became too detached from the true meaning of Christmas. For people like my parents, that can make the holidays exceptionally stressful. For kids like my brother and my sister, who really cling to this false perception of the holidays, it can be pretty damaging. And I saw the extent of that damage firsthand. When I was 9 years old, my parents, despite their efforts, just could not deliver on one fateful Christmas. Now, I must make clear that my parents are not the victims here. They've no one to blame but themselves for what happened that year. My father managed to get himself fired from his job a few months earlier. It was a direct result of him sucker punching a contractor over a stupid argument. Around that same time, my mother failed to get an overdue promotion, which may have also been a direct result of a physical altercation that I'd rather not recount. As a result, we had to have a very lean Christmas. But my brother and sister, they didn't care. They thought Santa would get them all the presents they wanted. Sure, our heat was getting turned off for long periods, and we relied heavily on fast food for weeks on end. But that just made them more excited for Christmas. My brother even said it.
Our parents may be losers, but Santa will make it right.
It's probably a good thing he said that to me in confidence. We both still believed in Santa at the time. But I wasn't about to make more demands than usual. It's just not my style. That said, I do admit I hoped Santa would deliver. I hoped he could do what our parents could not. We all ended up disappointed in the end. But don't think for a minute it's all Santa's fault. And no, I am not being coy with my words. I just have to be careful with how I recount what unfolded that fateful Christmas morning. Because for my sake and many others, I need to put it in its proper context. To say Christmas that year was disappointing would be inappropriate, given the sheer madness that unfolded. I'll never forget the looks on my brother and sister's face, rushing into the living room on Christmas morning. only to see one small present for each of them under the tree. At first, there was confusion. Was this it? Was this really all Santa had gotten them? Once that truth sank in, things got ugly. And my parents, they found a way to make it so much worse.
Maybe you were all just too naughty this year. Maybe Santa thought this was all you deserve.
That's how it began. The first of many excuses my parents made. I wish I could share some of them, but I am not comfortable repeating that amount of profanity. Initially, there was a lot of angry crying on the part of my brother and sister. First, they denied they had been that naughty. Then, my parents recounted all the times they'd gotten in trouble, all the times they'd been caught stealing, fighting, or misbehaving. Of course, my brother and sister didn't accept that. They even tried turning it around on our parents, claiming they were worse, having gotten fired and letting bills go unpaid. Somewhere along the line, my mother let slip that Santa wasn't real, and they were the ones who got all the gifts they craved. That did not go over well. This time, my siblings didn't bother with denial. They stopped crying and just yelled back at them, matching them curse for curse. At one point, my brother even attacked my father, biting him on the arm and causing a visible wound. I also think my sister whipped one of my mother's earrings off, causing this bloody wound on the side of her face. Where was I during all this, you might ask? Well, I kind of just hid in the corner the whole time. And yeah, it's as cowardly as it sounds, even for a kid. But once the biting and clawing started, I just decided to run. I no longer wanted to see how this would play out. I was already crying, I was already scared, and even a little broken, having heard my parents admit that Santa wasn't real. But to me, that was an afterthought. All I wanted at that point was for the yelling to stop. I ran back into my room. I slammed the door shut, hoping that would muffle the noise. But it didn't work. So I slipped into my closet, sank to the floor, and covered my ears, doing everything I could to drown it all out. Not this. Not today. Not on Christmas. I found myself saying that again and again, like a prayer of sorts. Wasn't saying it to anyone in particular. I didn't even expect anyone to answer. But someone eventually did.
Ho, ho, ho. It's okay, my boy. I'm here now.
It was him. Even before I opened my eyes, I knew it was him. Santa Claus, St. Nick, Father Christmas. The man my parents just said wasn't real. He opened the door to my closet. I felt this distinct cold fill the room. Cold that seemed to come straight from the North Pole. I stood up, gazed at him in awe, and was just astonished. It was Santa in the way any kid my age would have imagined. But there was also this strange look on his face. I won't say it was jolly or cheerful. He seemed almost menacing. But when his gaze narrowed on me, he smiled and extended his hand.
Come. Your Christmas spirit might be strong and pure, but everyone else in your home, that's what I'm here to address. And to do what must be done, I need your assistance.
Looking back on that moment, it seemed so terrifying. But through my young eyes, it was exciting. Santa Claus was real. He had come to make things right. I didn't know how he would do it. I just believed he could. In that regard, my belief was vindicated. Just not in a way I ever could have imagined. As soon as I grasped his hand, I felt a warmth inside me, like a shield that protected me from the intense cold that had filled the room. As I walked with him into the hall, I heard sharp winds gust through the house. The lights went out. The heat turned off. Out the windows, I watched as this once sunny Christmas morning turned dark. It was like someone had flipped the switch, turning everything outside into a moonless night. By the time we reached the living room, snow began falling. Inside my house. It was like being in a snow globe. At first, I thought it was amazing, an incredible feat of true Christmas magic. But then, I saw my parents and siblings, and my astonishment turned to horror. They'd been frozen. Not in the sense they'd been turned to ice, just that they were completely stiff, unable to move in the slightest. Their eyes were still open. Their skin was pale and covered in this strange frosty shell. I could tell they were breathing, but they were also afraid, much more so than I was at that moment. Santa, still holding my hand, walked to the middle of the room, standing between them and casting them this harsh, scolding glance, one that seemed very unbecoming of jolly old Santa Claus.
I am very disappointed in all of you. Long have I tolerated such disharmony, but this time, you've gone too far. Such reckless disregard for the spirit of Christmas cannot go unpunished.
I felt another sharp gust of cold wind through the room. My parents and siblings felt it too. I could see in their eyes how afraid they were. I even share some of that fear. I find myself squeezing Santa's hand a little harder. He then looks to me and casts a kind smile. A fresh warmth comes over me, as if to protect me from what's to come.
But you're in luck. Despite your influences, one of you has avoided such a naughty attitude. He thinks less of what he can gain and more of what he can offer. Time and again, he has given you an example to follow. And at every turn, you refuse to notice.
The expression on their faces change. They shift from fear to anger. But not towards Santa. Instead, it's at me. Seeing that, it hurt a lot more than I expected. Here they were, being told by Santa Claus himself that they had undermined the spirit of Christmas. And when I'm singled out just for being a good boy, their first instinct was to resent me? Not gonna lie, once the initial hurt wore off, I got downright mad at them. More so than I had ever been to that point in my life. Were Santa Claus not there, I might have said something I regretted, but he was not done.
Do not scold him. You are all truly without excuse. You've invited these consequences. I am simply here to impart them. But this being Christmas, it wouldn't be right to do so recklessly. So, I'll leave it up to the only one here who respects the spirit of the season. Tell me, little one, should I punish your family for their unceasing naughtiness?
There was a certain deviousness to his demeanor, as though he knew how I felt in that moment. I was basically in a position to decide whether or not my family should suffer for their lack of Christmas spirit. Me being just a kid, that's a hell of a predicament. As upset as I was with my family, they were still my family. And the idea of choosing to punish them, it did not sit right. I looked back at Santa for a moment, then towards my parents and siblings. I'd hoped to see some semblance of remorse. Hell, I'd settle for a simple plea for mercy. But even in their frozen state, I saw none of that. I just saw more anger and resentment. I could feel my brother and sister threatening me with their eyes, promising me untold physical harm. The look my parents gave me, that was even worse. And in that instant, any sympathy I might have had disappeared. While fighting back a mix of tears and anger, I just looked back towards Santa and nodded.
Very well. In the name of Christmas, I hereby inflict this much-deserved punishment.
With a simple wave of his hand, a whirlwind of cold air gushed through the room. Even through the howl, I could hear my parents and siblings whimper. The ice on their skin thickened, their faces contorted in discomfort. From the floor beneath them, a strange ball of reddish light formed. I can't begin to describe it. My young mind can only process so much. But from this light, these creatures emerged. I want to say they looked like elves, but they were more like evil gremlins or trolls in the bodies of hungry wolves. They had these thick, fang-like teeth. They were snarling hungrily, eyeing my parents and siblings with predatory intent. That's when their anger turned to fear. They watched on as these creatures took on this weird, ghostly form. Then they formed packs of 3 and attacked. At least, that's what it looked like at first. But instead of mauling them physically, they went for something else that was inside them. Something that wouldn't leave physical scars, but would wound them in ways from which they could never heal.
This is a lesson you should have learned long ago. If you only value that which is material, then you will ultimately lose what is immaterial. That small but precious essence that cannot be bought, wrapped, or packaged. So, as recompense, my little helpers are tearing out a piece of your souls. You may not have valued it before, but I promise, you will now. For without part of your soul, you will henceforth feel incomplete, lacking, diminished. You may still try to fill it with material goods, but rest assured, that will only leave you feeling more empty.
The creatures continued snarling and howling. They seemed so excited about consuming this glob of light from the core of their essence. I don't know if that's how souls are supposed to look, or if that's just how my young mind decided to process it. Eventually, I just had to look away. Seeing their faces contort and cringe, experiencing an agony that was unlike any physical pain, I couldn't watch it. Santa still comforted me, but he clearly took a perverse pleasure in seeing my family endure their punishment.
Rest assured, this piece of your souls will be put to good use. And when I leave, you will not remember this in full. Only the young one here will fully recall what has transpired. He is a good boy, despite being surrounded by naughty people. He is a fine example of what Christmas can be. But you, oh ho ho, you now know the true cost of such naughtiness.
What transpired after that, my memory gets a bit hazy. But when I emerged from my room, Santa was gone. It was sunny outside again. And my parents and siblings, they'd fallen silent. That fight they had earlier, it still happened. But now, they'd come down with this mysterious illness, one that kept them from further conflict. The rest of Christmas that fateful year was forgettable, at least for them. But in the days, months, and years that followed, I saw the lingering effects of Santa's punishment. My parents and siblings became weak, distant, reserved, and a host of other things I don't care to mention. They developed a new host of issues, physically and mentally. And whenever the holidays rolled around, it got noticeably worse. It often fell on me to carry out the festivities, but I didn't mind. If anything, that only helped me appreciate the holidays even more. Flash forward to today, my parents have since gotten divorced. they're as miserable alone as they ever were together. Well, misery is just one of the many issues they still deal with. As for me, I'm actually doing quite well. Life has been good to me. And I've tried to return the favor every chance I get, especially during Christmas. There are still times when I have mixed feelings about what happened that year. But in the end, I don't regret my choice. Santa Claus punished my family for how they approached Christmas. They deserved it.